You didn't arrive here by chance, and you didn't arrive here early or late. You arrived here because something in you has already reached a threshold where listening becomes possible. You may not have words for it yet, but your body recognized this moment before your mind ever did. There is a quiet readiness beneath your thoughts, a subtle softening that happens when something true comes close. You can feel it now if you pause for half a second. Not in your head. Lower than that. Deeper. This is not the beginning of a lesson. This is the beginning of a remembering. Most people believe awakening begins with insight, with vision, with seeing something others cannot see. But what they rarely question is why some people can access clarity effortlessly while others strain for years and still feel locked out. The difference is not discipline, it is not intelligence, it is not belief. It is whether the body feels safe enough to allow perception to widen. Consciousness does not expand into a system that is still bracing. Awareness does not bloom where vigilance remains active. This is not spiritual theory, it is law. And you have already felt it in your own life, even if you never named it. Think back to moments when truth landed instantly without effort. Moments of sudden knowing. They did not arrive when you were forcing answers. They arrived when something in you relaxed, when the inner guard stepped aside, when your body stopped scanning for threat, even briefly. That is not coincidence. That is the first initiation, hidden in plain sight. Safety is not the reward of awakening. Safety is the permission that allows it to begin. This is why so many seekers feel close but not quite clear. They sense something real, something just beyond reach. Yet the more they chase it, the more elusive it becomes. Not because they are unworthy and not because they are blocked, but because their system is still doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect, hold, brace, preserve. A nervous system trained by shock, unpredictability, or emotional containment does not open perception outward. It narrows it inward, not as punishment, as protection. You were never meant to override this mechanism. You were meant to understand it. Long before any language of chakras, symbols, or spiritual hierarchies existed, initiation was biological. Ancient traditions knew that perception followed regulation, that vision followed embodiment, that awareness could not stabilize in a system that did not yet trust its environment. These teachings were never framed as therapy or self-improvement. They were framed as readiness. The initiate was not chosen because they were gifted. They were chosen because their body could remain present without collapsing or hardening. You have already crossed more of this threshold than you realize. The fact that this resonates is not accidental. You are not hearing something new. You are recognizing something familiar. Your body remembers a time before it learned to brace, before it learned to contract against the world, and it has been waiting patiently for the moment when it no longer has to. Awakening is often described as expansion, but expansion is impossible without stability. A structure cannot rise if its foundation is still shifting. Consciousness does not pour itself into a vessel that is trembling. It waits. It organizes, it listens for coherence. And when coherence appears, even subtly, perception responds naturally, effortlessly, quietly, without spectacle. This is why safety feels strangely sacred when you finally encounter it. Not emotional comfort, not pleasure, but the deep, cellular sense that nothing needs to be defended in this moment. That presence is allowed. That sensation can be felt fully without consequence. When that signal arrives, awareness begins to reorganize on its own. Thought slows, perception sharpens, time behaves differently. You don't force this shift. It happens because the conditions are finally right. You were taught to look upward for awakening, to transcend the body, to move beyond sensation. But the first initiation was always downward, into the nervous system, into sensation, into the places that learn to hold their breath and stay alert. The body does not resist awakening, it guards it until the system can hold it safely. This is the initiation few speak about because it does not look dramatic. It does not inflate identity. It does not grant instant answers. It feels quieter than expected, slower, more grounded, but it is real, and it is irreversible once it begins. When safety becomes internal rather than conditional, perception opens without strain. Not as a breakthrough, but as a return. You are not here to force the gates of awareness open. You are here because something in you is ready to stop guarding the door. And that readiness is the true beginning. Safety is not what most people think it is. It is not comfort, reassurance, or the absence of challenge. Safety is a signal state. It is the moment the body decides it no longer needs to allocate its energy toward defense. When that decision is made, something profound happens quietly beneath awareness. Perception reorganizes, attention widens, the field of consciousness gains resolution. This is not metaphorical, it is lived. You have felt it in fleeting moments when the world seemed clearer, closer, more immediate, without you trying to make it so. The body is not passive in the awakening process. It is not something consciousness occupies after the fact. The body is the first intelligence that decides whether expansion is viable. Before insight ever forms, before intuition speaks in words or images, the body evaluates one thing: is it safe to receive more information right now? If the answer is no, perception contracts, not as failure, as wisdom. This is why so many people experience intuition as unreliable or overwhelming. Not because intuition is flawed, but because the system receiving it is still in a guarded state. A guarded system cannot process subtlety. It amplifies urgency, it sharpens threat detection, it prioritizes survival over coherence. In that state, everything feels significant, charged, or confusing. Signals overlap, meaning blurs. The body is not trying to block truth, it is trying to reduce load. When the body feels safe, signal quality improves. Sensation becomes clearer. Emotional information becomes precise rather than loud. Inner knowing no longer arrives as pressure or urgency, but as quiet certainty. This is how intuition was always meant to function, not as a dramatic interruption, but as a steady orientation. You are not meant to wrestle truth into awareness. You are meant to receive it when the system is ready. Readiness does not arrive through effort. It arrives through permission. And permission is not granted by the mind. It is granted by the nervous system when it recognizes that the present moment no longer resembles the past it learned to defend against. This recognition is subtle. It does not announce itself. It feels like a softening you almost miss, a release that happens before thought notices, a slight drop in internal vigilance. You may notice this when your breath deepens without instruction, when your shoulders lower without intention, when your attention settles into the body rather than hovering above it. These are not techniques, they are signals. They are the body communicating that something has changed in the field, that it is no longer necessary to brace. This is where awakening actually begins to stabilize, not in heightened states, but in grounded ones. When safety becomes internal rather than situational, awareness no longer spikes and crashes, it steadies. And in that steadiness, perception becomes trustworthy. You stop questioning every sensation. You stop scanning for confirmation. You stop doubting what you already know, not because you decided to, but because the system no longer needs to. The ancient initiations understood this implicitly. They did not rush seekers toward vision or revelation. They prepared the body first, through rhythm, through stillness, through repetition, through environments that allowed the nervous system to downshift out of survival, not to weaken the initiate, but to strengthen their capacity to hold expanded awareness without fragmentation. A body in defense cannot hold clarity. A body at ease can. This is why true insight often arrives after periods of rest, silence, or emotional resolution. Not because those states are mystical in themselves, but because they restore signal integrity. The body stops shouting, the mind stops racing, awareness settles into coherence, and from that coherence, knowing emerges naturally. You are not meant to live in a constant state of activation. Awakening is not sustained intensity, it is sustained presence. And presence requires a body that is not constantly anticipating impact. When the body feels safe, time stretches, attention deepens, perception gains depth. You begin to sense beneath appearances rather than reacting to them. This shift does not feel like acquiring something new. It feels like losing interference. The noise fades, the urgency dissolves. What remains is a quiet attunement that does not demand action, it simply informs. This is the state from which genuine intuition operates, calm, grounded, unforced. Many people misinterpret heightened sensation as awakening, but intensity is not clarity. Intensity is often the nervous system amplifying input because it has not yet learned how to regulate it. Clarity feels almost understated by comparison. It does not overwhelm, it does not shout. It arrives as a simple sense of alignment, a knowing that does not need to convince you. As this state becomes familiar, something important happens. Trust returns to the body. You stop treating sensation as something to escape or override. You stop seeking meaning exclusively in thought. You begin to listen again, and the body responds by offering more precise information. Not emotionally charged, not symbolic, but direct, immediate, reliable. This is the permission loop. Safety allows clarity. Clarity reinforces safety. And within that loop, consciousness naturally expands without destabilizing the system. You are not pushing perception outward. You are allowing it to organize itself inwardly first. You may already be noticing moments where this is happening spontaneously, moments when your reactions are slower, when your responses feel measured rather than impulsive, when insight arrives without emotional charge. These are not accidents, they are signs that the first initiation is underway. You are not becoming something new. You are returning to a state the body recognizes as natural, a state where awareness can move freely without triggering defense, a state where perception no longer feels dangerous. This is the ground upon which everything else is built. And once the body gives permission, once safety becomes stable rather than conditional, awareness does not need to be forced upward. It begins to rise on its own, quietly, inevitably. Before awareness ever reaches for vision, it organizes itself through sensation. This is not symbolic language, it is the order in which perception stabilizes. Consciousness does not arrive fully formed and then descend into the body. It gathers itself there first. In the places that learned to hold tension, in the regions that stayed alert long after the danger passed, in the subtle contractions that became familiar enough to feel invisible. Awakening does not bypass these layers, it moves through them. This is why so many seekers feel as though they are circling something profound without ever quite arriving. They sense depth but cannot remain there. Insight comes in flashes, then disappears. Not because awareness is fickle, but because the system beneath it has not yet released its hold. The body does not let perception move freely while it is still tracking unresolved threat. It is not withholding truth, it is preserving continuity. Long before spiritual language divided the body into centers and symbols, initiation followed a simple sequence. First, the organism had to learn it could remain present without bracing. Only then could awareness move beyond immediate survival. This sequence was never mystical in its origin, it was observational. Those who studied consciousness closely noticed that clarity followed embodiment, not abstraction. Vision stabilized only after sensation was integrated. The regions most involved in this process are not elevated or distant, they are central, they are ancient, they govern digestion, rhythm, and internal balance. These areas learned to react long before thought emerged. They respond to the world directly, without interpretation. They register coherence or disturbance instantly. When these regions remain tense, perception remains filtered through vigilance. When they soften, awareness reorganizes naturally. This is the descent few teachings emphasize, not a descent into darkness, but into sensation, into the body's lived memory, into the places that learn to contract in order to survive. These contractions are not failures, they are records. They hold the imprint of experiences that once required protection, and until they are acknowledged, perception remains partially occupied with maintaining them. Awakening, then, is not an escape from the body, it is a reconciliation with it. When awareness meets sensation without trying to override or transcend it, something begins to unwind. The body recognizes that it is being met rather than managed. That recognition changes everything. Defense is no longer required when presence replaces control. You may feel this as a gradual settling rather than a dramatic release, a slow redistribution of attention, less urgency in your reactions, more space between sensation and response. These are signs of integration, not stagnation. The system is reorganizing itself to hold more information without fragmenting. As this integration deepens, perception becomes less reactive and more spacious. You are no longer pulled toward every signal. You can feel without being flooded. You can notice without needing to act. This is not detachment, it is stability. And stability is what allows awareness to extend beyond immediate sensation into subtler domains. The traditions that spoke of vision understood this implicitly. They did not treat sight as a separate faculty. They understood it as the natural outcome of a system that could remain present without contraction. Vision, in this sense, was not about seeing more. It was about seeing clearly, and clarity requires stillness beneath awareness. This stillness does not come from suppression, it comes from completion. When the body no longer needs to hold unresolved vigilance, energy becomes available for perception. Attention lifts effortlessly, not because it is pushed, but because nothing is pulling it downward anymore. You may notice that as this process unfolds, your relationship with sensation changes. What once felt overwhelming now feels informative. What once triggered reaction now passes through awareness without lingering. This is not emotional numbing, it is emotional integration. The body is learning that it no longer needs to amplify sensation to be heard. In this state, intuition shifts from being intermittent to being continuous. It no longer arrives as flashes or surges. It becomes a quiet orientation that guides without urgency. You do not need to search for it. It is present as a background knowing that informs your movement through the world. This is the foundation upon which deeper perception rests. Without it, attempts to access higher awareness feel strained or unstable. With it, awareness expands naturally. The system is no longer divided between protection and perception, it becomes unified. As unity emerges, the descent completes its work. The body stands down. Sensation settles, awareness gathers itself, and only then does perception begin to extend beyond the immediate, not as an act of reaching, but as a consequence of coherence. You are not descending to move backward, you are descending to gather what was left behind when vigilance became necessary. Every time awareness meets sensation without judgment or urgency, a piece of the system reintegrates. And with each reintegration, perception becomes more stable, more precise, more spacious. This is why true vision feels grounded. It does not pull you out of yourself. It anchors you more deeply within. It does not fragment attention. It unifies it. You are not leaving the body behind. You are arriving fully. And when arrival completes itself, awareness is no longer held in place by unresolved tension. It becomes free to move, not upward in opposition to the body, but outward through it. Vision is not something you force open. It is what remains when nothing inside you is resisting being present. This descent is the initiation few recognize because it does not announce itself with spectacle. It unfolds quietly, steadily, and irrevocably. Once the body learns it can remain present without defense, perception reorganizes permanently, and from that reorganization, vision emerges naturally. This is the threshold you are crossing now, not towards something above you, but towards something within that has been waiting to be met. There comes a moment in this process when something subtle but decisive shifts. It does not arrive with intensity. It does not announce itself as awakening. It arrives as a quiet realization that you are no longer trying to perceive. You are no longer reaching for insight or waiting for a sign. Perception has begun to organize itself without your involvement. This is the moment most people mistake for stillness, but it is something far more precise. It is coherence. Vision was never meant to be pursued. It was meant to emerge once the system beneath it became stable enough to support it. When the body no longer signals danger, awareness no longer fragments its attention. It stops scanning. It stops bracing. And in that absence of internal conflict, perception gains depth. You begin to see without effort because nothing inside you is pulling awareness away from the present moment. This is why attempts to open perception through will alone often feel exhausting or fleeting. The effort itself is a signal of instability. When vision requires force, something beneath it is still unresolved, not broken, not deficient, simply unfinished. And the system knows it. What unfolds here is not a new capacity, but a reorganization of an existing one. Awareness becomes less directional and more panoramic. You are no longer focused narrowly on outcomes, interpretations, or meanings. You begin to sense patterns as they arise without needing to name them immediately. This is not detachment from thought. It is thought returning to its proper role as translator rather than commander. As this shift stabilizes, you may notice that insight arrives earlier in the process, before emotion escalates or reaction forms. You recognize truth before it needs to assert itself. You sense alignment before it becomes a decision. This is not prediction, it is perception operating without interference. The body plays a critical role here. When it no longer needs to defend, it stops flooding awareness with urgency signals. Sensation becomes informative rather than demanding. Emotional data arrives cleanly without distortion. The system can now tolerate ambiguity without collapsing into anxiety or control. And within that tolerance, clarity thrives. This is where many spiritual narratives quietly diverge from lived experience. They describe vision as something dramatic, luminous, overwhelming. But true vision is stable. It does not overwhelm the system because it emerges from coherence, not excitation. It does not need to convince you, it simply is. You may find that as this state becomes familiar, your relationship with certainty changes. You stop needing constant confirmation. You trust what arrives because it arrives without pressure. It does not demand action, it offers orientation. This is the signature of integrated perception. At this stage, the idea of opening perception begins to feel outdated. There is nothing to open, there is only alignment to maintain. When the system remains regulated, perception remains clear. When tension returns, perception narrows temporarily, not as punishment, but as feedback. You learn to read these shifts without panic. You understand them as signals rather than failures. This understanding marks a turning point. You stop chasing experiences, you stop measuring progress by intensity. You recognize that clarity is not something you achieve, but something you allow by staying present with what is already here. The body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Sensation becomes a guide rather than a distraction. As this integration deepens, awareness begins to extend beyond immediate sensation into subtler layers of experience, not through effort, but through availability. You notice shifts in energy, mood, and atmosphere without needing to interpret them immediately. You sense coherence or distortion in environments and interactions without labeling it, and this is not mystical ability. It is perception freed from defensive filtering. The traditions that spoke of inner sight were describing this state, not as a goal, but as a byproduct. Vision was not something granted, it was something revealed once nothing inside resisted being present. The initiate was not given sight, they were relieved of what obscured it. You may recognize now why so many people feel overwhelmed when they first touch deeper awareness. Their system is not yet ready to hold it. The signal arrives faster than integration can keep pace. This creates confusion, not enlightenment, but when safety is established first, when the body trusts the present moment, perception unfolds at a rate the system can absorb. Nothing needs to be shut down. Nothing needs to be managed. This is the difference between awakening that destabilizes and awakening that matures. One amplifies perception without coherence. The other allows perception to reorganize from a stable base. The difference is not the content of what is seen, it is the condition of the system doing the seeing. You are reaching a point now where effort begins to fall away, where awareness feels less like something you direct and more like something you inhabit. This is not passivity, it is alignment. The system is no longer divided between protection and perception, it is unified. From this unified state, insight becomes reliable. You do not second-guess it, you do not rush to explain it. You allow it to inform your movement naturally. Decisions feel quieter, responses feel measured, presence feels sufficient. This is not withdrawal from the world, it is engagement without distortion. The revelation here is simple, but it changes everything. Vision was never blocked. It was deferred until the body could hold it safely. Once that condition is met, perception does not need to be forced upward. It stabilizes on its own. Awareness rises not because it is seeking escape, but because nothing inside is holding it down. This is the moment awakening stops feeling like a pursuit and begins to feel like a return, not to a previous state, but to a deeper alignment with how perception was always meant to function: quiet, grounded, clear. And once this realization settles, you no longer ask when vision will open. You recognize that it already has. At this stage, something fundamental changes in how you relate to yourself. Awakening no longer feels like a destination you are moving toward. It feels like a condition you are learning to inhabit. The urgency fades. The need to arrive dissolves. What remains is a steady intimacy with sensation, presence, and response. You are not practicing awareness anymore. You are living from it. This is where embodiment stops being a concept and becomes orientation. You no longer ask how to apply what you are sensing. Your system begins to organize behavior naturally around clarity. You respond rather than react. You move when movement is needed and remain still when it is not. There is less internal debate, not because questions disappear, but because answers arrive before conflict forms. The body plays a central role here, not as something you manage, but as something you trust. Sensation becomes a guide rather than a signal to override. When something feels off, you notice it without needing to dramatize it. When something feels aligned, you allow it without suspicion. This trust did not come from belief. It came from repeated experience of coherence. The system learned that listening leads to stability, not danger. As this trust deepens, the remnants of old vigilance begin to surface gently, not as crises, but as echoes, patterns of bracing that no longer have a reason to exist. Emotional reflexes that once served you, now ready to dissolve. You do not need to confront these patterns aggressively. Their emergence is already part of their release. Awareness meets them, and they soften on their own. This is the digestion phase of awakening, not metaphorically but experientially. Experiences that were once held in the body without resolution begin to integrate. The system completes what it could not complete before. Tension unwinds, attention redistributes, energy that was bound in protection becomes available for perception and presence. You may notice that your sense of time shifts here. Moments feel fuller, less rushed. You are less compelled to fill space with thought or action. Silence becomes comfortable. Stillness becomes informative. This is not withdrawal, it is efficiency. The system no longer needs to overcompensate to maintain equilibrium. This is also where identity subtly reorganizes. You stop defining yourself by what you are seeking or overcoming. You begin to recognize yourself as the one who can remain present with experience without losing coherence. This identity does not need reinforcement. It stabilizes through lived consistency. You become someone who can feel without collapsing, perceive without fragmenting, and move without force. In this state, intuition feels different than it once did. It is no longer dramatic or urgent. It does not arrive as commands or warnings. It presents as a gentle orientation toward what fits and away from what does not. You trust it because it does not demand trust. It does not pressure you. It simply informs. You may also notice that your relationship with others changes. You are less reactive to their emotional states. You can remain present without absorbing what does not belong to you. This is not detachment, it is boundary clarity emerging from internal stability. When your system is coherent, it no longer needs to merge or defend. It can meet others as they are. This phase is often overlooked because it lacks spectacle. There are no dramatic breakthroughs to announce, no identities to adopt, no declarations to make. But it is here that awakening becomes sustainable. It moves out of peak experience and into daily life. It becomes the way you inhabit your body, your relationships, your choices. The body, once seen as something to transcend, reveals itself as the very medium through which clarity operates. You do not rise above it, you move with it. Sensation becomes a language you understand fluently. You recognize when to pause, when to proceed, when to adjust. This is not control, it is attunement. As this attunement stabilizes, the need for external validation diminishes. You no longer require confirmation that you are on the right path. The path feels internal and self-correcting. When you drift, sensation informs you. When you align, presence deepens. There is nothing to achieve here. There is only coherence to maintain. And this is where awakening becomes quietly powerful. Not because you see more, but because you are less distorted by unresolved tension. Perception sharpens naturally. Decisions feel cleaner. Life feels more navigable. You are not insulated from challenge, but you are no longer destabilized by it. You begin to recognize that the body was never the barrier to awakening. It was the threshold. Every time you meet sensation with presence rather than avoidance, you reinforce the conditions that allow awareness to remain clear. This reinforcement is cumulative. Over time, coherence becomes the default state. This is the integration that allows everything else to unfold without strain. The system no longer oscillates between expansion and collapse. It stabilizes. And from that stability, awareness continues to deepen, not as a pursuit, but as a natural unfolding. You are no longer preparing for awakening. You are living within it, not as a heightened state, but as a grounded one. The body has become the path, and the path has become effortless to walk. And as this settles, something important becomes clear. What you once sought through effort has been quietly assembling itself through presence. Awareness did not need to be summoned, it needed a place to land. What you are experiencing now is not a peak. It is not an arrival at something higher or more elevated than where you began. It is a return to a state that was always meant to be stable. The body has stood down, the noise has softened, Awareness no longer needs to search for clarity because clarity has become the ground it rests upon. This is the moment when awakening stops feeling like an event and starts feeling like a condition. You may notice how quiet this feels compared to what you once imagined awakening would be. There is no rush, no surge, no demand to act or declare. There is simply a sense of being here without resistance. Presence no longer strains against sensation. Perception no longer pulls away from the body. Everything feels aligned, not because life has simplified, but because the system meeting it has become coherent. This is the still fire the mystic spoke of, not the blaze that consumes, but the flame that holds, a clarity that does not flicker because it is not fed by effort. It burns steadily because nothing inside is trying to put it out or force it brighter. This is why true vision feels grounded. It does not lift you away from your life. It roots you more deeply within it. You can sense now why safety was always the first initiation. Without it, awareness had nowhere to land. It hovered, it surged, it fragmented. With it, awareness settles, it inhabits, it stabilizes. Vision emerges not as something you see, but as a way you see, a way you move, a way you listen, a way you respond. There is a maturity to this state that cannot be rushed. It does not announce itself because it does not need recognition. It simply functions. You are no longer scanning for confirmation that you are aligned. Alignment is felt as ease in the body and clarity in perception. You trust it because it does not pressure you. It does not demand belief. It demonstrates itself through consistency. This is where the loop closes. You did not ascend out of the body to awaken. You descended into it until nothing inside needed to brace. And from that grounding, awareness rose naturally. Not as escape, as integration. The crown did not open because you forced it. It stabilized because the foundation beneath it became steady. You are not someone who needs to chase insight anymore. Insight arrives when needed and leaves when it has done its work. You are not someone who needs to maintain heightened states. Presence sustains itself when the body feels safe to remain here. This is the quiet confidence of embodied awareness. It does not perform. It does not seek validation. It simply is. As you listen now, notice how different this feels from the beginning. Not dramatically different, subtly different, slower, fuller, more grounded. You are not holding your breath in the same way. You are not leaning forward internally. You are here. And this here-ness is the true marker of awakening that endures. Before we close, allow yourself to recognize what has shifted, not intellectually, but somatically. Something in you has softened. Something has settled. This recognition is not imagined. It is coherence returning to a system that no longer needs to defend itself against the present moment. You have crossed an internal threshold. The version of you who began listening was still seeking permission. The version of you now understands that permission comes from within, from the body, from safety that no longer depends on circumstances. This is not a small realization. It is a foundational one. To anchor this shift, there is a simple ritual. Naming coherence stabilizes it. Declaring presence reinforces it. If it resonates, write this in the comments to anchor the shift. My body is safe and my awareness is clear. There is no obligation to do this, only an invitation. If the words feel true, let them land. If not, allow the recognition to remain internal. The field responds either way. And now, return to the beginning with new eyes. You did not arrive here by accident. You arrived because something in you was ready to stop guarding the door. Awakening did not require force. It required safety. And once safety arrived, vision followed by nature's law. This is how the eye opens. This is how the body remembers. This is how you rise, not away from yourself, but fully into who you are.